Q, next question.
Next question, Ed. From your experience at School 16 and as a mentor, what advice do you give aspiring founders about balancing personal growth?
What I will talk about is balancing life in general, right? Because, and I talk to a lot of founders where they, they want to build a company. They have a job. Sometimes the job is not a good fit for their skills or whatever it is, right? But they need to build a company. And actually, Will, our CEO, had an interesting post yesterday because he talked about how he just built a house himself, which I actually didn't even know that he was doing. That he built his house from scratch.
I've seen it.
It's intense. And he's a CEO, right? And they have a podcast, right? So I think too many people limit themselves for what they can accomplish. Should I invest in personal development or personal growth or my job or whatever it is, right? And look, there is such a thing as spreading yourself too thin where if you try to do everything all at once, you're not going to be good at anything. But for most of us, I believe there are more hours in the day than we think, and it's more so about being efficient with your time. And the other thing I'll say is a lot of people do a poor job with prioritizing, right? So for example, let's say you want to invest in some personal development. Well, what does that mean for you, right? You can't do everything at once. Let's say you want to learn how to edit a podcast and you want to become a good writer, right? Well, maybe you don't want to do both at the same exact time, focused on doing the deep work and putting in the hours for the number one priority skill that you want to develop first. Do that for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, quite frankly. I think a lot of people overestimate how much time they need to invest, in terms of, I need to do this for years to be successful. No, within a year of launching my podcast, I had producers from CBS I was hosting podcasting events across New York City, and I had producers from CBS coming to our events, seeing us as the experts, even though before that year, I had never ran a podcast before. So it doesn't have to take a ton of time, but you do have to put in the hours and do the deep work to develop yourself. It's important to prioritize yourself first, though, so to make sure that you can actually give yourself a chance to get good at something.
Let me add and make it a little spicy. I think that personal development is stupid if it's not directed properly. So I see people get to the point where everyone's just trying to push you into learn this and do that, and you can be this and you can be that. And I think it just fills people's heads. So here's how I'm coaching my kids. I say, if you want to do personal development, professional development, figure out how to balance, do it in alignment with two things. One, if it's just sheer joy and you're doing it because you enjoy it and it helps you with stress management, creative thinking, it just gets you out, lowers that blood pressure, which I'm working on right now, then do it. And there are so many things that I am interested in that I enjoy just for the sheer enjoyment of wasting my time. So I just waste time with it and I let myself go. Like, I'm totally okay. There you go. Like, for a while, I had to stop because of health issues. But for a while, I was really getting into smoking tobacco pipes, different types of pipes, the Churchills, and then cleaning them, and the different types of tobacco and all those things. It was like fantastic. And I just did it, didn't contribute anywhere in my life. In fact, it was a smelly habit. Nobody enjoyed. The other thing is, I say, don't put effort into it until you've experimented, until you're sure you can make it in the top 10% of something. Let me give you all an example. One of the projects that I'm working on that started off as a personal hobby was writing fantasy novels, right? And I just started writing and I put some stuff out and then I got opinions on it. And what I want to hear from actual editors, you can be in the top 10%. And I decided to prioritize my time based on that, but I waited for the signal. And then I said, all right, what's the feedback? I got feedback. It was positive. And I started learning a little more. And then I had someone tell me, this is better than 90% of the stuff that's out there right now. And in anything, I just said, okay. So now I spend a little bit of time every day learning how to be a better writer. Never planned on it. Wasn't part of my career path. I just did it because it will contribute, and it's turning into exploring a startup and all those things. So it does align, but I have to be sure that there's going to be ROI. It's either enjoyment or there's going to be ROI. I see way too many people try to develop these skills, or they try to do stuff, and they're going to be in the bottom 50%, and I just don't see the point. So that's my opinion on that. I'm curious, Vadim, I'm going to let you bring up the rear, okay? So Q and Jen, Q first. What's your opinion on me thinking personal development is stupid, or what is your opinion on personal development as it is?
So I think, the question was a little bit misphrased by myself. My apologies. So it was kind of balancing personal development with business growth, right? And I think I don't think personal development is stupid per se, but I do agree with the aspect of your opinion, Ed, where, you're talking about people kind of filling everybody's head up, right? But I think to be able to differentiate between personal development and business, I think is very important. How far are you going to go if you're a terrible person and complete lack of self-awareness? That's going to inevitably impact your business, right? So I think personal development is important, but again, to your point, I do agree with doing it in a guided way. What are you trying to address? How are you trying to address it? What are the qualities that you're trying to improve? In what ways are you trying to improve? So being intentional about personal development, I think, is just as important as just being committed to personal development in the first place.
Let me add to that because, Vadim, I think you can support this, and then I want to hear Jen's opinion. We meet founders all the time that I just listen to. Jen sees these founders, and I just think to myself, if you just spent a little more time on your soft skills, emotional regulation, learning to read the room, you'd be so much better off further along in life. But no, you're passive aggressive. You absolutely, when you talk, you monologue to an audience of one. You see this when founders give pitches and they drone on for 10 minutes about their life story, and it just sounds really great in their head. And I'm just thinking to myself, listen, if you were in a room with investors, they would have laughed you out already. Like, they would have said to your face, you're nuts, we're never going to invest in you, etc., because they can be cruel like that. So I agree, personal development is important, but as far as what, that's the balance, that's the question. Jen, what's your thought on personal development or anything I just said in terms of you experiencing these founders with me?
That's a very good point. It's very interesting sitting in the background listening to founders pitch and the way that they come across, their attitude, even just their knowledge in it can come across as arrogant or as confident. And I think that's a good factor to think about when pitching to investors. I think I'd agree with everything that's said, especially Q, just knowing what your reasoning is for personal development. I know several years ago for myself, I think I was so obsessed with trying to make sure that I was always bettering myself. And I got lost in it. And I got to a point where I felt like I was working on this and this and this over here. And I just got so burnt out and I didn't really know what I was doing everything for. And it just blurred everything in my vision of, well, maybe I'm not doing anything. And everything, you can't do everything all at once. So really narrowing in what's the reason for this, doing one thing at a time or a couple things that correspond with each other and slowly walking that path, but ultimately asking yourself, what is the goal? What does it look like down the road that you want to become or how you want to be different?
Let me just be clear. If you want to be a founder and you want to build a unicorn company, we're talking the top 1% to 2% of startups. You want to get to that level, you must be in the top 10% of those personal skills: leadership, communication, emotional intelligence, executive presence, coaching other people, handling crisis situations. You have to be in the top 10%. You not get there unless you're in the top 10%. And that's the reason a lot of these trillionaire company CEOs have executive coaches and they pay huge amounts of money. I'm talking like $8,000 a day just for the coaching. Like, that's just the level that you need to be at, because when you're dealing with billion-dollar problems, like, you have to have billion-dollar levels of personal development. Vadim, based on all that, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I do think that now that Q clarified the question, I do think that oftentimes your personal development will go hand in hand with business growth. So you're inherently focusing on personal development if your business is growing because you're probably acquiring new skills. There's things that I did with my last company. There's not only things that I accomplished, but also new skills that I had to pick up that I had never done before. Even you talked about getting better at writing. Because we started the podcast a couple of months after starting, I started writing for a publication called Goalcast, and a couple months after that, started writing for Forbes, and then eventually Harvard Business Review. I wasn't that great of a writer maybe a year or two before that, but I started writing thousands and thousands of words every single week, and you get better through that process. I like what you said, Ed, earlier about ROI. ROI can come in many different forms. The bare minimum ROI is, do you actually want to do this? Are you actually enjoying this, right? I remember during COVID, I learned how to solve a Rubik's Cube, right? In the beginning, it took me like 4 minutes. It took me a month to do it. Right now, I can do it in under a minute. Not that great. There's children that could do it in 25 seconds, but I wanted to learn how to do it, and I did. And is there a purpose for learning how to solve a Rubik's Cube? No, but it was really fun, and that was our ROI for me. I also took, right before COVID, I took a improv class from Upright Citizens Brigade. And this is just an interesting anecdote in terms of ROI and how to think about these things. I always wanted to try out comedy, and improv just sounded fun. I did some acting in high school and college, and so it made sense for me. And I remember we were all practicing for this big sort of stage day where you invite all your friends and you perform in front of them and do improv in front of them. And I remember the day before it was a 3-hour session, and me and this Iranian guy was super, super funny. We kind of went on stage and we did our little improv skit. And it was one of the funniest things I probably ever done, and he's done, and we only did it for 15 people, right? It wasn't in front of an audience, it was during practice, and improv is such that you'll never repeat it again. And at first I thought, oh, this sucks. I wish we could do this in front of an actual audience so other people can see it. But then I realized that that moment was so fun and so enjoyable for me, and it'll never be repeated again. But that's okay because I experienced it, and that's why I put in 3 hours every Friday, for the last couple of months, is to get good enough to do that, to have that kind of experience, and to prepare myself for that big stage. So oftentimes, founders, when your head's down, things are boring, you're alone, you're not getting that recognition, but you're preparing yourself for that big stage, whether it's a big customer, $1 million problem, or whatever it might be. So it's worth the effort, but you have to be willing to put in the time.
You do realize, Vadim, that there are people out there juggle 3 Rubik's Cubes and solve them at the same time. So but you're way ahead of me. I've never solved a Rubik's Cube, but let me ask this question. This is something we can end with. All right, let's just open it up. So I just shared that one skill that I'm trying to work on for personal development that I think will lead to professional growth. And that's so great because imagine you're doing improv in front of 15 people. Well, guess what? How many founders would kill to be presenting in front of 15 customers, right? SaaS customers or executives, and they have to think on their feet. So those skills translate. But here's the question for all of you. What personal skill are you going to work on next? Like I just went there, personal development. So I'm working on writing. So that's a big thing. I'm going to leave the ladies to kind of gather the answers. Vadim, what's your next Rubik's Cube or improv that you're working on?
Yeah, so actually for me, it's writing as well. I want to be a better writer. I want to be published across more and more publications. And generally for me, it actually is content creation and video content creation. I'm not spending a ton of time putting content out there, but I am spending time putting some interesting content that's exciting for me to consume, that I think is fun or funny or whatever it is. And that takes hours, and no one's going to ever see that content, but it's fun for me. So those are 2 things. The third, I would say professionally, is I've been advising a lot of entrepreneurs on B2B sales. I've done a lot of B2B sales in my career, but I'm increasingly more interested in multi-stakeholder long sales cycles, 6 to 12-month sales, which is very, very complicated. It's a little bit more outside of what I did in my career because I did sort of more transactional, few stakeholder sales. So I'm consuming a lot of content from thought leaders and creators about that because sales is actually changing a lot right now in the market because people buy things differently, people consume content differently, and I want to be on top of all the current trends for how to be an effective B2B salesperson.
Yeah, and that's how you become a thought leader. And I can definitely say creating content, being a content creator is a completely different skill than the content itself and how to present it. That's something that I was just blown away, even learning to lead a podcast and putting this all together. Like that's just a skill. Hugh, what's your skill that you're working on?
Actually, it kind of goes right in line with Vadim's point there. He was talking about earlier time management and prioritization. And so funny enough, 2 weeks ago, I got me a nice little agenda. I haven't used one of these since maybe university. So that's something that I'm prioritizing. Obviously, I have other goals and long-term goals and things like that. But before being able to reach those, being able to prioritize and manage your time, because no matter what I choose to do in the future, that's going to be a very important thing to learn how to do.
100%. Jen, what are you working on?
I hate to say that I'm roughly along the same lines, but organization for me, which as much as I am a very organized person, I feel like I have a little bit here and there. So narrowing everything down into tools that specifically work and are all in one area. And that goes for work and personal life right now.
Well, I will be the benefactor of you learning more organization skills. So I fully endorse that 100%. Same with you, Q. This is just us saying, work on yourself. You can work on stuff. Just want to encourage. If we're talking about these skills and we want to learn and we want to explore, well, how much more can everybody else do it, right? If Vadim can solve a Rubik's Cube, I know other people can learn how to do it because Vadim has proven that you can learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube. Everything is a skill, creating content, all those things. Encourage all the founders out there.